Hello, everybody. My name is Bethany. I'm a fellow at the Carthage College Writing Center, and today I will be giving you a quick presentation about how to peer review. So after this presentation, you will know the purpose of peer review, you will understand the importance of peer review, and you'll have a basic understanding of how to peer review somebody else's paper. So first, we're going to start with a brief overview of peer review. So what is peer review? In the broad sense, peer review is the evaluation of a person's work or performance by a group of people in the same occupation, profession, or industry. So for example, if you've had to write a research paper, you might recall having to find peer-reviewed academic articles about your topic. So what that means is, just like this quote is saying, those articles you find have been evaluated by multiple people within that subject matter, basically to check for like accuracy and professionalism and things like that. For our purposes, peer review is going to mean us reading our classmates' essays and providing them with feedback that they can use to improve their writing. So in our cases, we are the experts. What is the purpose of peer review? So the purpose of peer review is to provide and receive feedback on a piece of writing. Getting feedback on writing allows the author to then improve upon it, to make it stronger. And peer reviewers usually look for things like clarity, accuracy, and organization, but there are other things that can be looked at as well. And it's important to note that researchers, experts, and academic writers all rely heavily on peer reviews. It's not just something for people who are struggling with their writing. Next, we're going to go over the basics of how to peer review. So the first thing to think about is the process of peer reviewing. So for us, we might be asked or assigned to read someone's paper and leave them with feedback. So typically, the author will tell you what the prompt is and tell you what they want feedback on if it's like a friend asking you to do it. If you're assigned to leave feedback on somebody's essay, you'll probably already know what the prompt is because it's likely that it's in a class that you have together. So once you get the paper, you might consider skimming through the whole essay first just to get an idea of what's happening in it. And then you can go back and reread the entire essay or a specific section of the essay in detail and provide appropriate comments. So what should I focus on when peer reviewing? That's the big question, right? Like if you've never peer reviewed before, you're probably wondering like, how do I give good feedback? So what you focus on when you peer review will be kind of dependent on what your goal is. So you might want to look at the essay as a whole, or you might want to look at individual sections, paragraphs, or even sentences. Typically, the author will tell you what they want. So if you're looking at the essay as a whole, you can ask yourself questions like, do the big ideas of the essay make sense? And is the author's argument presented in an effective and easy to understand manner? If you're looking at individual sections, paragraphs, or even sentences, you might ask yourself, is anything unclear? Does anything sound awkward? Is it missing something? Things along those lines. So there are 6 things to look for while peer reviewing. There are other things other than these 6 things, but these are pretty basic, so we're just going to start with these. So the first thing to look for is content. The content of the essay, in our sense, refers to things like the author's arguments and claims, the evidence they use to support their arguments, and the accuracy and strength of the evidence. So on the screen, you can see some questions to ask yourself. So in terms of evidence, like what is the evidence that the author uses to support their claims? And is this evidence correct and effective? If it's not, that's something you would want to provide feedback on. The next thing we're going to talk about is structure. So you can look at the structure in a broad sense of like the overall paper, or more narrowly at individual paragraphs. So if you're looking at the structure of the entire essay, you can ask yourself, are there an introduction and a conclusion? Is there a thesis? Are the paragraphs presented in a logical order? If you're looking more narrowly, you can ask yourself about the structure of each individual paragraph. So are there transition sentences? Are there topic sentences? And is there evidence and analysis? We can also look for clarity as peer reviewers. So clarity refers to the ability of the reader to understand the meaning of the essay. So if you read somebody's essay and don't understand what it's saying or struggle understanding certain parts of it, you can trust that since you had that experience as a reader, it's likely that somebody else would also have that experience. So you can ask yourself, was anything in the essay unclear? Are there any terms or words used incorrectly, or perhaps words that you don't know? Is the word choice effective? And then if something's not clear for you, you can leave a comment on it, and hopefully the author would take that into consideration to improve upon their essay. The next thing we could look at is style. So style refers to the way a person actually writes and includes things like tone, word choice, and sentence structure. So questions to ask yourself about the essay. Is the tone appropriate for the paper? If you're writing a formal academic paper, the writer wants to avoid first-person pronouns and text abbreviations and slang and cliches and things like that. You can also ask, does the writing contain contractions? Again, in an academic paper, we tend to avoid contractions. So if you read somebody's essay and their essay has contractions, you can tell them that you noticed it and perhaps they want to change it. You can also ask, is the sentence structure varied throughout? If somebody uses the same sentence structure over and over throughout their entire essay, the essay could become sort of bland and boring and not engaging. So if you notice that the sentence structure isn't varied, or perhaps that it's varied too much, that's another thing that you could leave feedback on. The next thing we're going to talk about is grammar. So grammar should not be the focus of peer review because it tends to be less important than other parts, such as content or structure. If somebody makes a couple grammar mistakes or punctuation mistakes, whoever's reading it will still be able to understand what their argument is saying. But if their structure or content is incorrect, it will inhibit the reader's ability to understand it. But if you happen to see some grammar or punctuation mistakes, you can feel free to correct them as long as it's not time-consuming. So do not fix every mistake of the same kind. So make a note the first time you see it and tell the author that they should read through the rest of their paper looking for mistakes of the same kind to fix themselves. The last thing we're going to talk about is citations. So citations are pretty straightforward. You can ask yourself, is everything cited? If the information sounds like it came from an academic source but lacks a citation, it might need one. You can ask, is the citation style correct? Perhaps you notice that they're using MLA format when they're supposed to be using APA. You can leave a comment about that. You can look for parenthetical citations and in-text citations. And finally, do they have a reference page? And remember, when it comes to citations, it is always better to be safe than sorry. So before we end this presentation, there are just a few things for you to keep in mind when you're peer reviewing. Keep in mind that you have to trust yourself. So trust that you know enough about writing and that you have enough experience to give valuable feedback. Oftentimes when people feel uncomfortable with providing peer feedback, it's because they feel like they don't know enough to give valuable feedback, and that's not true. Everybody has enough writing experience and experience overall that can help provide them with good feedback. The next thing to keep in mind is that it's important to give honest feedback. Help your peer by sharing your true thoughts and opinions in a constructive way. The last thing to keep in mind is that it's important to give real feedback. So simply saying that this is good or this is bad without any real feedback is more harmful than helpful. So be specific with your comments and provide explanations wherever it's necessary. So for example, if you read through something and it's unclear, you could just say that this is unclear, but you could also say this is unclear because, and then explain why you think it was unclear to you. That's just an example. Okay, thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking your time to watch this video. As always, if you have any questions, you can always email the Writing Center or you could email one of the fellows, and feel free to make an appointment at the Writing Center if you ever want somebody to look over your papers. That is all for today. Thank you very much.